That's all right. You don't need sound, do you? Okay, well, this would be a number of things. One is solo, but that's the problem. So, if you have a solo set somewhere, maybe solo, maybe you're at some other page, you have no idea where to solo at, you can hit the little ellipses up here at the top, and there's an option for clear solo, and maybe get rid of it. I assume you're still hearing nothing. So, that could be... All right, well... You have sound?
I can hear you from headphones.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, do you still hear sound? Okay.
I'm going to have to hear somebody else.
You're probably hearing people on Zoom. If you want, there's a knob on the back of the mixer that has the volume for your headset. I didn't do anything other than touch it, so maybe the potentiometer is like failing. So if you have a problem again, I guess adjust that a little bit.
Testing, testing. Haha, we have sound. So we are not quite at 1:30 yet. We have a few minutes until. But I just wanted to warn everybody there is a slight change to how we are doing the presentations from what you might be used to in the past. The presenters have the option to use all 10 minutes for their presentation as well as the 2 minutes for questions. So we will be having the next presenter come up at the 12-minute mark like normal. and get ready for the presentation, but we might be doing questions while they are prepping for their presentation during that time. Does that make any sense to the people out there? Sorry. Okay. So, yeah, I'm Diana. I will be moderating this session today, my first moderation session here at GLPA. So we will do our best to keep things on time. We're still a few minutes out from 1:30, but we'll get started in just a minute with Dan, and we will go on from there. All right, everyone. I'd like to gather your attention over to Dan, and we're going to go ahead and get started with our first paper session.
Hi there. So I'm Dan Tell. I'm a manager of planetarium engineering at the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, California, USA. The presentation I'm giving today is just for like shorthand titling how to get the job. But what it's really born out of is, of course, coming through the pandemic, we've seen more museum closures and layoffs and changes in job status than probably at any point before in the history of our field. And of course, it's not just limited to our field. This is a screenshot from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics just last week when they published that more people have quit their jobs in the last quarter than any other quarter on record. So not just layoffs, not just job changes, but basically people are getting fed up with bad working conditions, looking for new work, looking for new opportunities, especially, frankly, in sectors that have been rough, like hospitality has an especially high quit rate. And I think that's relevant to our field as well, because it's a really cool job. We love it, but we have a tendency to work for nonprofits that, frankly, take advantage of our passion for the work to underpay people or overwork people. And so there's a lot of reasons why anyone in the planetarium world should at any time be open to considering new opportunities, putting yourself out there to try to get what you actually deserve, not just what your current institution is willing to pay you. And so at the California Academy of Sciences, we have been rehiring a lot of positions. We've been doing a lot of interviews, seeing a lot of applications. And it's really made me notice there are a lot of people who are really, really good candidates who have been knocking themselves lower in the running by making small mistakes that I think could be easily preventable. So taking both my experience with the many, many interviews I've done both recently and over the years, so my wife's experience, both as a hiring manager and having worked at a career center, remembering some things from Janet Beckstrom, did a good workshop on resume writing about 10 years ago during the last recession, and as well as just general research, combine those things together to provide some simple tips for improving resumes, cover letters, and all of that. So first things, just want a little bit of how to be prepared for a job hunt. And so one thing I really want to know is your employers are going to research you. It's 2021. Everybody can use the internet. And more important than not being findable by potential employers is making sure that you have a positive online presence. And so there's a variety of ways you can do that. The written paper has a lot more tips around this. But some of the big things, make sure, that you have public things on the internet about yourself that look good. Because if you're not controlling the narrative, search results will control the narrative for you. So a great way to do that is, for example, having a YouTube channel that contains shows you've given, things you've produced, curating what is public on your social media to look very good and positive. Using LinkedIn can really help you boost up your presence. And one of the biggest things I would always recommend, present at conferences, because that's networking. That's how you get your peers at other institutions to remember who you are. If somebody remembers, oh yeah, I saw them give a presentation, especially if it was a good one, that can help you get a foot in the door to the next step of an interview process. So, as well as, of course, it gives you publications that will show up in Google search results. So highly recommend present at every conference you can. There's a lot of great reasons to do it, not least of which you never know when it will help your career. As for how to find Planetarium-specific jobs, a lot of employers will shoot out job openings to, the mass index sites like LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever. But there are a couple of Planetarium-specific job boards that are worth paying attention to. There's the IPS Career Center. A lot of domes will post opportunities on the DomeL listserv, Dome Dialogue's Facebook group, and Full Dome Database often reposts jobs that have been posted elsewhere. So those are all worth keeping in mind. And one thing I really want to emphasize, don't be intimidated by the qualifications on a job posting. So this is often cited that there was a couple decades ago, an internal study at Hewlett-Packard that showed that men apply for jobs where they only meet 60% of the qualifications. Women don't apply for jobs unless they meet 100%. So either we live in a world where there's a ton of unqualified men going around doing jobs, which is very believable, or qualifications aren't really hard qualifications. They are a benchmark used for scoring candidates. So never be afraid to apply for a job you don't meet 100% of the qualifications of. It's a benchmark. It's not an absolute. And room exists to basically see if you're a better personality fit than someone who has paper qualifications might be. So never sell out that opportunity to yourself. And a big thing in our industry too, this has come up many times as someone posting jobs, is salary information can be hard to come by in the nonprofit world. This is an intentional tactic by a lot of employers to encourage competition without people knowing what they're competing for. And one thing I've heard is a lot of feedback from potential applicants is it's a waste of my time to apply for a job if I don't know what the salary is. I'm of two minds of that. I agree, transparency on salary would be great. But I understand why institutions are reluctant to, and often, like in my institution, that decision is made so far outside of my department, I have no influence on it. But one thing I would emphasize, applying for a job is a skill. You can only get better at a skill by practicing it and having experience. So applying for a job where the pay might be too low is still an opportunity to practice, refine, and hone your skills. It's only a waste of time if you treat it as a waste of your time. But applying and interviewing is still a skill worth practicing and worth building. And of course, everything is still negotiable. Regardless of what salary they might intend to pay you or want to pay for the position, you should always ask for what you actually need or want. And if they can't meet it, just not the right opportunity. Find something better. A little bit of resume tips. There's a lot of debate of whether 1 or 2 pages better. There is some data from recruiters, I had to look this up, that does favor 2 pages. The sort of general advice given out is actually 1 page is good for early career people, so you're not overinflating your resume. 2 pages for someone mid-career or later. You can pare it down. Your resume really should be a living document. You should update it and modify it for every job. You don't just have one fixed resume you should send to everybody, but it's a highlight reel of your career. So focus on highlighting projects and jobs that have relevant experience to the one you're applying for. And I would also really emphasize, really don't exceed 2 pages. I've had to filter through a lot of 10-page resumes lately, which is kind of wacky. I read them, but not everybody will. Some other stuff, I guess I just said that part. But also, formatting is a big deal. I've met several people who, regardless of the fact that we live in a digital world, like to print resumes, and will print resumes, and if your resume doesn't print right, tough, they just won't consider those parts of it. So it's always worth making sure your resume properly fits on those 2 pages, and will print, and always, always, always save, export, and upload as a PDF. Never let an employer see a Word doc version of your resume, both for the editability, but also if you edit it with track changes and maybe got comments and help from friends and family, they might see those in there. So PDF is always your way to go. And another thing I would really emphasize, don't lie on your resume. This is, my wife seriously had to rescind 2 offers from people in the last 3 months because they lied on their resume. They would have been qualified. They were, functionally qualified, but they lied about a previous job title, and so they got their offers rescinded. So just the risk of lying is too high. Just don't do it. You can embellish, but avoid lies, because again, employers will be researching you. Another thing I really want to emphasize is the cover letter. And I saw this on like a meme Instagram a couple weeks ago. And I was really happy to see in the responses to this were a bunch of people saying, I'm an HR recruiter, don't take this advice. I really want to emphasize, don't take this advice. It's certainly not for a planetarium job. And there's an important reason why. For one, kind of to this meme, our job is the closest thing to riding a pony on a space rainbow. So you actually should be like kind of applying for a dream job, hopefully. But the other point I would make around that too is, especially in a creative field and a competitive job, you want to stand out in any way that you can. And a cover letter is your elevator pitch. It is your chance to sell yourself to the person you're applying to. So keep it short, keep it succinct, but make it engaging. This is your chance to sell yourself. And it's the one chance for your potential employer, potentially, to see your creative, unstructured writing ability. See how you can string together sentences. Check your spelling and grammar, all those things. So really, your cover letter has potential to be the most important thing you submit for a job application. So really put the work into it. How much time do I have left? I feel like I'm rushing. Okay. Getting winded. A few tips for interviewing. A big thing I would emphasize is practicing. Again, interviewing, like everything else here, is a skill. And one of the best things you can do is do mock or practice interviews with a friend or colleague or a family member, as long as there's someone you trust and are open to receiving honest, critical feedback from. Because again, you want to be your best, you need honest feedback to be your best. Another thing I'd emphasize is avoid negativity when possible in an interview. We were hiring for a management position not too long ago, and a question we had that I really liked was, tell us one positive skill that you learned from a manager in your past. And you would not believe how many people instead spin that around to talking about how bad their past managers have been. Don't do that. That's really bad. The question was specifically structured to see if people had good examples of mentorship that they would carry forward. And just for a lot of reasons, yeah, just don't insult your past employers, because we all have complaints about our jobs. But a new employer kind of wants to know you're coming in open to a fresh slate. You're not just going to be a bad character. Listen to questions and their structures, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know, or take a second to think up an answer. There's a lot of people who just talk in circles. We can tell. We know when you do that. And also prepare for unexpected questions. It's becoming more common for employers to share a structured list of questions with applicants first. But frankly, I do like seeing how people think on their feet. So always watch out for wildcard questions getting thrown out there. And the most important thing with an interview is ask questions. An interview is a two-way conversation. It shouldn't just be the potential employer interviewing you to see if you're a good fit. You should be interviewing them to see if they're a good fit for you. If nothing else, I always suggest just ask a question about what the workplace culture is like, what the team you'd be working with is like, how long people have been there. But ask them questions. That's how you get an engaging conversation going and can make yourself stand out from the pack. Post-interview, I highly recommend just a short thank you note, and then just wait. Hiring decisions can take a long time, but of course, the more that you bother a potential employer, the less likely you are to hear back from them. And I had a case for a technical job a couple years ago where one of our applicants wrote increasingly angry letters every single week about the position, up to the point where he was telling us we were really missing out by not hiring him. So that really got it tanked into the trash can. So yeah, just a polite thank you, show appreciation for people taking their time to speak with you, and then wait, because you can't control the situation after that. And a big piece of advice I give is, remember, you never know who you're competing with for a job. So make it a competition with yourself. Did you do the best that you feel like you can do? If not, how could you improve? What could you do better? But don't worry about how you perform next to anyone else, because you don't know. You have no way of knowing. And so in the end, if you got the job, congratulations. But if you didn't, reflect back. Like I said, it's a competition with yourself, not with somebody else. Don't think of it as someone beat you in a sense, but just, did you perform as well as you could, or was even the job the right fit for you? What could you do to grow and be better and improve and do better on the next application? Those are really my tips. Hopefully they're useful and good. There's a lot more in the paper. I put them to the test myself this summer, actually, and I think they're pretty good. So, yeah, I guess I can turn over to questions.
All right, we have a little bit of time for questions. Does anyone have one? I can bring the microphone to you.
As an employer, do you have any advice about what we should or should not do as employers?
Sure. I think one of the biggest changes starting to come up in employment right now is how education gets weighted into the hiring experience. This has certainly been a big thing in coastal cities like San Francisco. I know it's been a big thing at Adler in Chicago. Basically the idea that having a bachelor's degree or more is the minimum qualification people should be having for planetarium work. Because I think there's a feeling that there are a lot of very talented people in the planetarium field, including myself, who don't have a college degree. And so really making sure that college degree or experience is something that factors into more and more job postings. Because if you want the best talent, frankly, there's a lot of people, I mean, as I always say, nobody became a planetarian on purpose, with a few exceptions. Everybody fell backwards into this somehow. And because nobody was targeting this job, the educational criterion, I don't want to say it's meaningless, but there's a lot of ways to pick up relevant experience in the field. And so making sure to weight people who might have that relevant experience without a degree, I think is really worthwhile. Because there's some great talent in this field at all levels of education. So I think having that as an open possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, I'm going to ask Jessica to come on up and start hooking her things up. But Dan, if you want to take any more questions, are you good?
I can take another question.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, let me swing around here real quick.
And while you're swinging around, one other thing too I'd say, of course, is, we want to grow this field. We want to get more people into it and really be open to hiring people who aren't just like you, of course. Make sure you are listening to people and engaging with people and engaging with them for who they are, who their mind is. You want to ask them questions to find out who they are and how they fit with you as a personality. So that really means having open, engaging, in-depth conversations with your applicants and giving as many people as you can a fair chance.
So I have a question, and it kind of, in a way, dovetails into what you just said. If you're hiring somebody, and I'm not sure, for what position in a planetarium, but say they're going to interact with the public, and say you are hiring a college graduate, what would be the single? You were looking at various majors. They graduated different majors. What would be the primary major that you would select between? Say a communications major versus a physics major versus what have you?
Right, and so in my experience, for a public presenter, I would be less concerned about specific major and more concerned with relevant experience. I would want to know that they had existing public speaking experience or an interest and willingness to go in for public speaking. Because again, for public interaction, that's one of the biggest things. Also, when we are interviewing our presenters, one of the biggest things we're looking for is someone who will say, I don't know, when they don't know the answer to a question. And that's one of the things we've often found with astronomy degree holders, is they're very reluctant to say, I don't know, when they don't know, when they're fresh out of school. It's obviously a skill most of us learn a few years afterwards, but fresh graduates often really reluctant to say they don't know. So that's a big thing we're always trying to get out of applicants for public-facing positions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan. Let's give him another round of applause. And we are passing the mic over to Jessica for her presentation.
All right. Hello, my name is Jessica Trucks. I am talking about the comparison between virtual and in-person big astronomy planetarium shows. This is preliminary results from the research. And first of all, we're talking about the Dome Plus model, and we're focusing on the interest at this point. So the Dome Plus model was the design principles that went into the resources that we talked about this morning, which is the show, the web portal, the social media live events, and the hands-on activities. For this talk, I'm going to bore you with a table real quick. So I'm going to be talking about the 4-phase interest model, which starts off with 2 situational phases, which are based on the learning environment. So these are triggered situational phases, which is phase 1. So this is the early situational phases, which are stimulated by the environment. So these are stimulated interest phases. And a person in this phase will have fleeting or no re-engagement in the content that they're seeing. And they need support to re-engage in the content. And these individuals will have positive or negative feelings in the content that they're watching. In the maintain situational interest phases, which is phase 2, they'll be stimulated by the environment. They will re-engage with the content, but they will have to be externally supported to re-engage with others. And they'll have positive feelings in the content. When you get to phase 3 and phase 4, these are the individual interest phases. So these are likely to be self-induced engagement in interest. So these individuals, they'll pose questions to get answers and to support and gain knowledge in the content that they're learning about. They'll have positive feelings and they'll have value for the topic that they're learning about. And for the well-developed interest, so these are self-induced engagement. These individuals, they'll generate and they'll seek out answers. And they have the highest value for this topic that they're learning about. So, stand on this side. So for our data, we started out with 3 post-show focus groups. So we talked with 8 people directly after they watched the 360 version of the Planetarium show. And then we have 13 individual interviews with individuals who watched the 360 versions of the show after they filled out a survey. And then we conducted 5 interviews with people who watched the show in the Planetarium. So after analysis, for phase 1 individuals, we have 1 person who we placed in the phase 1, which this is an individual who went to the Planetarium show with her son. She just happened to walk past. Her son thought it looked interesting. They went to the Planetarium show. They didn't really have a good or bad feeling about the Planetarium show. They were very honest about the fact that they weren't going to engage in anything astronomy related afterwards. But we have no online individuals who fit into this category from our research so far. For our phase 2 individuals, we have 3 in-person individuals. One of these individuals, she found her museum on TikTok, decided to go to her museum, found the astronomy exhibit, decided to go to the astronomy show, thought it was very cool, and decided to learn some more astronomy that way. The other 2 were walking past their astronomy and thought it would be a fun afternoon activity. 2 of the online participants came because their family members were interested in astronomy, but they have no interest themselves. The other 2 individuals, one of them has a deep connection to their local planetarium, but no real interest in astronomy, just likes going to their local planetarium for any new planetarium show they have, ever since they were a kid. The last individual came for class obligations. So had to go to the planetarium for a class and had to write a paper, but still had an enjoyable time. So for the phase 3, the single person that's in person is a high school student who has an interest in observational astronomy, who told me he did not know there were other types of astronomy besides observational astronomy, so is now learning that there's more to astronomy than observing. The other phase 3 that were online, 3 of those are kids, 2 of which want to become astronomers when they grow up. 1 wants to learn more about giant telescopes after watching Big Astronomy. 2 of those are university students. 2 are university employees with no connection to astronomy. And 2 are retired individuals who are science related, but aren't really astronomy related. Now this last phase is a little bit special. There are no in-person individuals in this last phase. They're all online. But every single online person in this one, all 9 of those, are in some way connected to astronomy. Every last one is either an informal or formal astronomy educator. 5 of those teach astronomy as part of their career. The other 4 volunteer in their communities to teach astronomy. So we've noticed that for the online content, the groupings of individuals are more towards the higher ends of the phases, whereas the in-person, the lower phases we're seeing for this content. This is preliminary. We only have 5 individuals so far. We do have more interviews to come. We have currently, that I have yet to analyze, more for the in-person, but I have not got those analyzed completely yet. Like I said, it's preliminary. But they do tend, because I did those interviews myself, they do tend more towards the early phases. Most of those individuals came to the planetarium for something to do on a rainy afternoon. But what does this mean for implications? From what we've seen, planetariums can probably tailor their online content to those individuals who have an interest in astronomy. But the earlier phases are not well represented with online content. They don't have an interest in astronomy. We're not seeing that in the research. Okay. So maybe that could benefit from a change in marketing strategy. And maybe we can offer content that connects to other areas of interest for individuals. Maybe something in history, or archaeology, or biology. And for future work, like I mentioned, I have additional data that's yet to be analyzed. Data collection is still ongoing. We have additional surveys as well as interviews. We're still collecting interviews from ongoing shows. We also have other avenues of research, as well as identity and agency, which were part of those design principles at the beginning of this talk. And as they mentioned this morning, we are looking into the communities of blind, visually impaired, and deaf, hard of hearing, into working with them to make the big astronomy project more accessible. And if you decide to run the show in your domes, please let us know. And if you have any questions, please let me know and go view the show tonight if you haven't already. It's at 10 o'clock in the planetarium. And I will go ahead and leave you with that one.
All right, we have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have a question? Hi, I was wondering, I might have missed this, but how exactly did you go about giving the surveys to participants? Was it optional? Well, I assume it was optional, but how did they come across it, I guess is my question.
So the online surveys, so the 360 is a 360 YouTube show when we ran it. So those were actually put online as a link, and that was optional. So they basically went out, filled it out online. When we do it in person, we have handouts and a QR code, and they can just do it on their phone, or they can take the handouts home and they fill it out online on the computer.
Any other questions?
I knew I should say that. Thank you. What surprised you? Did you find, these are small number statistics still, but were you surprised by these outcomes?
Not entirely. Especially with the online content, because a lot of online content, when you search for videos to look online, a lot of your previous search parameters is searching for stuff you've already looked for. So your previous search parameters is already searching for stuff you like. So videos that pop up on your screen is stuff you already searched for. So videos, if you already like astronomy, astronomy videos will pop up on your screen. So if individuals already like astronomy, their astronomy videos will pop up on your screen. So it could be the same for these individuals. So I'm not sure how we get around that. Yeah, and also the lower phase individuals online who are watching the show, they can just leave in the middle of the show. If they're not enjoying themselves, they can just X out of YouTube. And we do see that in the data analytics. So there are individuals who will leave. Like the average, if I can remember the number off the top of my head, the average view time for some of the shows was like 6 minutes.
All right,
So there are some that just X out.
I'm going to jump in here so that Raymond can go ahead and set up their presentation. We can give Jessica another round of applause for a great job.
If you want to click it, right here.
Which one is the?
Forward, back, laser, blank.
Okay.
All right, let's switch things over to Raymond.
Hello, I have two connected talks, and the first talk is a continuation of some work that we've done and presented before, although now we have more fuller data. And the second talk is connected to this because it's the same course that we're talking about. So, first of all, I'd like to talk about teaching astronomy with computational activities, which we introduced to a general astronomy course. The motive for the transformation was that students were having difficulty with interpreting and applying concepts. They were having some difficulty with the mathematics involved, and they were having difficulty connecting the concepts with the mathematics. So the goals of this transition were to improve student engagement, to create deeper understanding of concepts, to get students to link concepts in mathematics, and to have them learn to make predictions from models, and then to encourage discovery of relationships between different variables or properties. And And this was an iterative design project that we completed in 4 stages over 4 semesters. The first stage was to introduce active learning to a traditional lecture-based astronomy course. In the second phase, the second semester, we recorded the lecture material and put it online. Third semester was creating computational activities and introducing them to the class. And the fourth stage, fourth semester, was revising computational activities, adding some new ones, and then going with that. All right, so the computation that I'm talking about here are programming or coding solutions to problems using programming languages or spreadsheets. The students integrate concepts and mathematics in order to produce solutions, and this reinforces the concepts and the learning through production of concept-based results. We chose computation because it gets the students to think about what the formula represent. The concepts they have to apply the concepts in a significant way. They have to integrate concepts and formula or concepts in mathematics. This also facilitates them learning about prediction, and it can be implemented as active learning, which is something we very much wanted to keep, student involvement. And computation is used in schools and workplaces, so this was an introduction to that and things that they'd encounter later on. So the course was a traditional algebra-based astronomy course with typical topics. It was taught using active learning already. There was a low-level physics course as a prerequisite, no laboratory or recitation component, and this course was taught both online and in person, although not at the same time. The population where all class years were represented was a mix of non-science and science majors. Typically, about 50% of the course were pre-service science teachers who had this as a course requirement, and this gave us the opportunity to demonstrate active learning and research-based teaching methods to pre-service teachers. Here are some of the computational activities that we were doing: early solar system, various electromagnetic activities, planetary relationships, Kepler's laws, planetary climate and energy balance, Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, and various stellar characteristic and demographic activities, and Hubble's law. Now, these activities were done with Excel spreadsheets. We chose Excel spreadsheets because at least half the class had no experience with programming, although most of them did know what a spreadsheet was and have some exposure to it. Spreadsheet coding is relatively easy to learn, and it's widely available to all the students. We had them do calculation and graphing activities both, and we focused on the output and didn't worry too much about what the format was that the students were producing. We provide them with template spreadsheets, which included instructions and questions, some scaffolding or guiding that we were doing. And in completing these, the students would name the input cells with the variable names and not just symbols. And then when they were creating formulas to generate output, they were actually essentially writing out the formula in words. And that gave them a little better idea about what the concepts were doing, what the formulas were doing. So also, we had the students working collaboratively in groups so that they could assist one another and give each other ideas. Some of the examples are, there was a Kepler's law activity where we gave them the distance from the sun and had them generate the length of the planetary year, and then reverse this and generate the distance from the sun given the length of the planetary year. In this is an example of what we were doing with the naming of cells. There's an input cell, in this case distance, and when they used this to generate an output of period, then they were writing out the formula in words for the most part, and it gives a little better idea of what's going on in the formula. There was an early solar system and differentiation of matter activity where we had them plot the temperature at the location of the early planets or planet formation and versus the distance away from the sun. And they got this curve. We also had an activity sheet that had this curve presented in a straight line, and this gave us the opportunity to show them how that straight line was generated by plotting the logarithm of the temperature versus the logarithm of the distance. We gave them a group of neighborhood stars along with the spectral class and the luminosity, and then had them sort the stars, and this allowed them to then find out how many stars were in each spectral class, at least locally, and the average luminosity of those stars, and then they could make a bar chart of number of stars versus spectral class and average luminosity versus spectral class. And then there was a Hubble's law activity where we gave them the recessional velocity and the redshift and distance and had them plot recessional velocity versus distance, take the slope of that and get some version of the Hubble constant. And we also had them plot recessional velocity versus redshift to show the relationship between the redshift and the velocity. Now, difficulties and drawbacks. This is harder to do. It takes more preparation and takes more time to present both. There were no ready-made exercises available, so I had to generate all of them. Oops. The students sometimes had difficulty with mathematics, and so mostly we tried them to get them to help each other, although I would also help them. Sometimes we would have to teach students about spreadsheets, and there were some differences between online versions of spreadsheets and natively resident versions of spreadsheets. We did both quantitative and qualitative assessments. We did pre and post tests with the test of astronomy standards and with the lunar phases concept inventory for quantitative assessment. And what we got was from the pre and post test scores in the control semester, which was active learning but not computation, we got a gain of 13%. In the first computational semester, we got a pre to post gain of 8%. With the revised exercises in the second semester, we got a pre to post gain of 20%. Okay. All right. For the LPCI, we got a pre to post gain of 15%. First computational semester was not as good, but we did get a gain of 1% at least, which may not be statistically significant. And we got a pre to post gain in the second semester of 29%. Perhaps I should finish first. We did a toast analysis by question, and these were the questions that they commonly got correct: sun's position, moon's phases, stellar origins. Commonly, they got incorrect stellar movement and time relationships, time and position relationships, solar formation, and how gravity works in space. The LPCI analysis by questions showed that they got the features of the moon's orbit and the moon's phases right, but they did not correctly relate the moon's position, time of day or time of month, and phase. They were often got incorrect the causes of moon phases, and they were uncertain about the new moon. We also did a qualitative assessment with a 17-question free response survey, and 89% said that they liked the computational exercises and also said that they thought the computational exercises helped them. 78% thought that they could use the spreadsheet skills elsewhere, and 89% liked the idea of group work. Some of the student quotes were that the computation helped with understanding the concepts, and that the group work helped them work out the process of getting an answer together. So the conclusions were that the student or the computational activities improved student understanding and enjoyment both of the course. The students valued group work. When we used templates as opposed to just throwing them into it blind, the templates improved student confidence and reduced the confusion about things. And also it allowed us to present active learning and research-based teaching methods to the pre-service teachers. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions?
So just thinking of someone where this is, 50% of their job, this is really cool. Has thought been given to expanding this to like a visualization component of processing the data and ingesting it into some sort of astronomy software like OpenSpace?
None of us that I know of have given any thought to that. These are students who, at least half of them, are not programmers or familiar with programming. So there is a group working on this sort of thing. It's called Pickup. I can't remember the first word, but for integrating computation in undergraduate physics.
Normally at this time, I'd ask our next presenter to come on up and set up, but if you'd like, you can answer another question before you switch over.
She had a question.
Yep.
I'll ask another one. Do you find that you have to teach them something about evaluating answers? Like numeracy, basic numeracy, this number makes sense, or do you teach them about that?
That is part of the implied teaching, or part of the hidden curriculum that is there. We will occasionally discuss, does this make sense when you get this, or does this not make sense? There isn't a formal program for there, but we do talk about that sort of thing. And they will often pick this up on their own, that doesn't make sense. You have the sun 15 feet away from the earth sort of thing. So let's look at that again. But they will often come up with this on their own.
Awesome. We've got about 2 more minutes before we start again. Would you like one more question?
Sure.
Yeah, so I actually found your last point about the results of how much they enjoyed the computation and how much they enjoyed I'm not saying I don't believe you. I found that shocking. What did you do? What magic thing did you do that made the students, A, enjoy the fact that they were doing some computation, B, enjoy group work of all things? So if you could dive into what you think is unique about this that works so well, because I found that amazing.
2 things that I can think of, and I'm speculating a little bit here, but I'm also interpreting from both interviews and surveys which we've given the classes. Number 1 is active learning. They're actually doing something rather than sitting there listening to me talk, or even better / worse, staring at a computer screen as if I were a YouTube video. So it's active learning. They're participating in this, either in a Zoom breakout room or in person. I mean, they scatter themselves around the floor of the planetarium when we do this. The other thing is that they are working together. They're talking to each other. Aside from just being involved, they get to add this social component to the learning. And so half from data, in other words, the qualitative, the surveys, and half from reading about things, those 2 things seem to be why they enjoy the class.
Awesome. So we can give you another round of applause for your first presentation. And you can go ahead and start with your second whenever you're ready.
All right. This is related in that the course that I'm talking about in this talk is the same course that we were talking about in the other talk. So you will actually see the same, 2 of the same slides at least twice, but with a little bit different perspective. Now, what this is about is that we are talking about moving courses online. The impetus for this was the pandemic, but it was already coming before that. So, so remote and online learning are trending now. They're going to be the coming thing. In 2019, 37% of the students had at least one online course. In 2020, online courses were the default. And in a survey taken this year, 43% of the students said that they would like at least one online course. So online and remote courses are going to be a thing of the future. Now, in going from in-person to online courses, the goals in transitioning this course were to, first of all, still communicate content knowledge, to maintain student interest and attention, stimulate student engagement and involvement, to promote learning, certainly, to build concept understanding and develop critical thinking skills. And so I came up with some curriculum design principles when I was working on the transition from in-person to online. First of all, I decided that I didn't want to just talk at the students, as I said before, as if they were listening to a YouTube video of me. I also wanted to provide structure to keep the students focused on task and remind them of deadlines. I wanted to involve the students in the learning, and this meant giving them activities, active learning. I wanted to encourage discussion and interaction because that helps learning. And so this involved making group work a part of the course. And I wanted to communicate with students often to let them know that, yes, there is a course out there. Yes, I'm paying attention, and that they should also pay attention. And if you've got problems, communicate with me or communicate with your fellow students. One of the things that I wanted to do, I happen to like active learning to begin with, but I wanted to do active learning because these are instructional methods that actually involve students in the learning process. So they're not just sitting there watching a computer screen. It requires students to do meaningful learning activities, either computation, as I was talking about before, or some other form of activity. This means that they're going to reflect on what they're doing, and it adds a social component to the learning process. The benefits of active learning from various references are that it draws students into the learning process. It facilitates student construction of knowledge, deepens understanding, it builds critical thinking skills, improves knowledge retention, and it supports weaker students, especially through this social component, because the weaker students can listen to the other group members. If they're having trouble with something, they can talk to the other students about it, or they may just hear their answer in the conversation that they are having difficulty with. Now, the active learning instruments that I had access to and used were ranking tasks, lecture tutorials, think, pair, share, or peer instruction, hands-on activities, and the computational activities that I was talking about before. The tools that I had and used for online learning were Zoom, ReggieNet, which is a version of the Sakai learning management system, which is available online, and video recording. Now, the course was, we talked a little bit about this earlier, the course was a single semester algebra or astronomy course covering standard topics. It was algebra and trigonometry based as far as the mathematics. There was a low-level physics course as a prerequisite. Generally around 30 students were in the course, and it was a mix of science and non-science majors. Although one semester I did have 90% of the students were fine arts majors, and they did fine with this. So the course was originally half lecture and half active learning when we were in person, and then there was no laboratory or recitation component, which made it a little bit more difficult to do active learning. The instructional modes that I had available were asynchronous, where there are no set in-person meetings. The learning doesn't take place live. There are no set meeting times, and the students all work at their own paces. Synchronous learning modes, where you have live sessions which the students attend attend online. There are specific meeting times, and the students interact in real time with the instructor and with each other. Now, the first semester online, the course was taught asynchronously. The lectures were recorded and made available through the LMS. Homework and labs and assessments were all done online. testing and assessment were done, again, through the learning management system. And essentially, to my thinking, the course was a lecture course with video lectures and very little instructor involvement that the students could see. Second semester, I switched to synchronous learning, partly because I saw that students were not meeting deadlines and they were becoming unfocused as to what they should be doing and what kind of tasks they should be completing and when. So it functioned largely as a flipped classroom where the lectures were recorded and made available online, and then during the class meeting times, the students would meet and collaboratively complete things like computational activities, those think, pair, share activities. The classes were synchronous Zoom meetings, and I sent the class frequent emails, certainly once or twice a week. In the meetings, we had a brief introduction, and then the students were broken up. The students were not broken. But we used Zoom breakout rooms and had 3 to 4 students in each breakout room, and then they would collaboratively complete whatever activities were available for that particular session. I would circulate through the Zoom rooms, talking with the students, answering questions, listening to the discussions, and then at the end of the class session, the students would upload the completed activities to an LMS Dropbox. I gave them about 10 minutes after to finish things up and polish it as they wanted. These are a couple of the activities that we did, the Kepler's Law activity, which you saw earlier, and a ranking task for phases of the moon. Again, we did quantitative and qualitative assessments both, with the test of astronomy standards and the lunar phases concept inventory for quantitative, and 17-question free response survey for qualitative. There were also some previous interviews that we are done that we had access to. All right, same slide. Control semester, which was in person, pre to post gain on the toast was 13%. The asynchronous semester, pre to post gain was 8% for the toast, and the second semester, which was synchronous, we had the 20% pre to post gain. For the LPCI, in-person gain was 15% pre to post, asynchronous semester was 1% gain, and the synchronous semester was 29%. Now, this is not to say that online is necessarily better than in person. I happen to think that in person is better. However, we did get pre to post gains rather than losses, so it seemed to work decently well. Looking at both interviews and surveys, 80 to 90% of the students liked the activities that we were doing and said that they gained better understanding by using these active learning activities. And 70 to 80% of the students thought that they could use the knowledge elsewhere. So, in conclusion, we got good pre to post gains on the assessments, which indicated that our online transition was successful. Active learning in the virtual classroom got student acceptance and approval. It maintained student interest. We had good attendance, or I had good attendance, in the online courses. Thank you.
All right, let's get some questions in.
I guess I'll ask my question after all. Both times in both talks, your pre-test has a significant difference. The first and the third, so the control in the second semester is similar, and the second semester, the second item, if you will, is much better. Do you have an idea of why would these students be different?
I have several ideas, and they are speculating. One could be that the first online semester, the asynchronous semester, the students may have decided that they were going to look up the answers, and so that the pre to post would have been similar. All right. That is speculation. I have no evidence that they did that. I didn't look at that, didn't ask them if they did that, but that's certainly one possibility.
Awesome. Do we have one last question, or are we good? All right, let's give you another round of applause. Thank you so much. And with that, we can get our next presenter on up. And we have about 3 minutes to prep you and get you ready for our 2:30 talk. All right, we've got about 2 minutes, so please talk amongst yourselves. We're going to make sure we stay right on time, so we got 2 minutes before our 2:30 talk. All right, the muttering is dying off on its own, but we're going to go ahead and switch things over. We are about ready for our 2:30 talk to get started, and I'm going to pass things over to Bob.
Thank you, thank you. Welcome everyone, 2:30 in the afternoon, always the toughest time, right, to give a talk. I hope you're all caffeinated and whatnot. This is me. I work in Milwaukee, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit. Just know we reopened on July 22nd, finally. It was been long, and I just wanted to show this because we captured that UFO hovering above, I don't know. So we got new LED lighting on the dome roof, so it's kind of cool. The pumpkin one for Halloween. So that was just recently installed. So Starry messaging from Galileo to today. I'm a big Galileo fan. Jim Schweitzer and I talked a little bit. I mean, I just love history. His story is just so amazing to me. I've read so many books about him. I didn't know he had a smartphone. But he was explaining to the Padre here, excuse me, I'll prove it to you on Google. So yeah, I can just imagine Galileo in today's world, right? I mean, he was not shy. He was not a shy man. And he was very aggressive, and he was very smart. And this is the real picture. So if you back up, you know, just crop that. So, but I love the disbelieving face on that picture. I think you've all seen that picture before. If you haven't, it's just like, yeah, right. Put it in modern language. And there's one story that the person wouldn't even look through the telescope, just refused to even look through it. So he was very fast and shrewd. I don't know about the timeline here, if you're aware of this, but in March 1609, he heard of the telescope in the Netherlands. He built his own real quick, and he made the observations in the fall, and he made observations. And by the March of 1610, he published the book. I mean, this is like in a year, in the 1610. And he printed in Latin. You'll see the asterisk there in a moment. And he was, of course, rewarded for it. And he got a new job. He got to go back to his homeland and everything. The little asterisk, he wrote in Latin because that was the professional language at the time, the science language. But he got some bad reviews from other scientists, and he was, anyway, he put his rest of his books in Italian, so it reached more people and he get less critics. So he was a marketer extraordinaire in this time. He really was. And it's just amazing. I don't know if, I've always seen this picture, and I'm sure you have too, but I just had to translate it. So unfolding great and very wonderful sights and displaying to the gaze of everyone, but especially philosophers and astronomers, the things that were observed by me. It goes on. But I mean, what an intro, right? We're all writers, and we all do this. Did we ever translate this before? I never did till now. But that's pretty eloquent language for this guy. And, but especially, the 4 planets, and you can read the rest of it. But it's just, anyway, it was fun doing this paper, just finding some of these nuggets like this. So I'll tell you a little story. We did a show on Galileo 12 years ago. Dava Sobel, I don't know how it got in my brain. She wrote the book Galileo's Daughter. I just thought, oh, she'd be a good narrator. She knows Galileo. She never narrated a show before. And she had a very tough time. And I go, just pretend there's an audience there or whatever. And she just picked it up like that. She's just very smart. She picked it up, and she just did a great job narrating. But she also edited my script. So I did a whole show on Galileo. And so I had this line, because I wanted to tell people that, he wasn't all just genius and smart. He was a human, and he was stubborn and arrogant, and he was not always right. Because, he never believed in Kepler's elliptical orbits. I mean, he thought that was ridiculous. So what did David do? All his life, Galileo was a proud man. He is spirited and competitive. She was very protective of him. I changed it. I wasn't gonna, she's the writer. She's written all these great books, and I'm whatever. So she was, and then of course she came out for the premiere and everything, and it was a fun night. So another, scientist, Newton. I think a lot of you know he's not a very good scientist or a communicator. Excuse me. So he was translated. I just wanted to share with you a book. Anyone heard of this book, Newton the Counterfeiter? A few people have. It's a fantastic read. He went after, because back in those days, the people were counterfeiting money and they had to stop it, and Newton was the scientific investigator. So it's just a fun story. Newton didn't write it, but anyway. And then I picked up on this story as I was doing research on, great scientists through history or good communicators, which we're all trying to be. Her name is Jane Marcet, and she wrote this book, Conversations on Chemistry, in 1806, and she wrote it in lively conversations, kind of like Galileo's book, The Two Dialogues, after not being able to understand a chemist, Humphrey Davy. And she based this on her personal experience and worked with her husband, and this inspired Michael Faraday. And if you know about Michael Faraday, he was one of the best communicators ever. I mean, he was really, really good. And he was inspired by this lady. And there are other reasons Faraday was a good communicator. It wasn't just that, but, and I just love that Faraday developed what one writer called audience-centered science communication. And this is, of course, we use these buzzwords now and things like that, target audience and all that stuff, know who your audience is, but Faraday was great. Of course, he had, with his electricity and electromagnetism, he had great experiments, and just wowed crowds back then. And then who's more famous than Einstein? In terms of a communicator, you can debate that, but he had the best quotes. I mean, who's quoted more than Einstein? I mean, and you can pick your favorite quotes. I'll just pop them up on the screen here, but I mean, I was just picking ones I liked, and a lot of you have heard these before. And there's a whole book, The Quotable Einstein. I mean, who else has a book, just all of quotes from one person? And these are things we try to pass on to our planetarium audiences. And they're just great. I don't have the one about authority. He always detested authority, and whoever punished him made him an authority figure. He just didn't. Anyway, you know about Einstein, but these are great. I'm one of those writers who, we do a monthly newsletter, and I always put a quote to start. I think it's a great headliner, and it pulls people in. If you read books and that it has a quote at the start, you know, it's great. Part of the reason I'm here is because of this guy. I was 19 when this came out, and I just thought, you know, it was great. Obviously, it was the #1 show on PBS at the time. And, you know, Sagan's whole style, he found things to relate, everyday life. You know, you're talking about far distant things. We got to teach all this stuff. It's way out there. But he always brought it back to earth. And this apple pie thing just always got me. It's like, what are you setting up this elaborate set and doing that? Okay, so I had to repeat it, you know, in a planetarium show. We did the whole thing with the apple pie because it's one of our shows we do, but we recreated that whole thing that in Full Dome that Sagan did 40 years ago, and just teaching about the elements, where they all came from, the Big Bang and supernovae and so on. And then, of course, the preeminent guy today, Tyson. I mean, you can argue these guys whether they're good or not. They're popular, obviously. I saw a personal story. I saw Tyson about 5 years ago. I thought I was watching a stand-up comic. What? 2 minutes. I really did. I mean, it was like every 30 seconds he had to tell a joke. And we always debate how much humor to use. And I saw him like 25 years ago in Minneapolis, and he only had a few jokes. So trying to find that balance, I mean, he's really bought into how popular he is in a sense. These are just some of my favorite writers, just sharing some books. Casey Cole, she's written some great books. I love Freeman Dyson. I got a chance to meet him. I mean, if you don't know him, look him up. His books are great. Stephen Jay Gould, just a great writer. One of my favorite writers. He's an evolutionist, more anthropology, not astronomy, but still good. Lisa Randall is great. Her books, she's got a new one on dinosaurs and dark matter. Of course, David Sobel, The Longitude is just, if you haven't read that, read it. I don't know if many of you have heard of Lauren Isley. Anyone? A few of you? He's not really an astronomy guy. He's more of a philosopher, but he was an anthropologist, and he would write. He's got a book called The Star Thrower. It's about starfish. And, it's just a short story. He usually writes in a collective short stories. And then to get modern, not just books. How many have heard of this website? Raise your hand. Okay, how many know how to pronounce it? Kurt's Gazette. I had to look up the meaning. What does that mean? It means shortly said or in a few words. That's what it means. And they're phenomenal. There was a presentation in our virtual thing last year, but they hire scientists to make sure all the content is right. But it's called Minimal Animation. That's the Earth there in the upper right. That's their logo. And I don't know if any of you have heard of this guy, Dr. James O'Donoghue. His videos are great. I use them all the time to share social media posts. I mean, we've all heard that light can go around the Earth in 7 seconds. I've never seen it videoized. And he just created this real easy, simple. That's kind of his style. It gets, points that we teach all the time, and he'll make an animation about it. So he's a NASA scientist, and I just really like his work. So we do a monthly newsletter of 8,000 people. I write it. It's great research for me because I can stay up with the cosmos. I try to write it. I can recognize good writing. It's really hard for me to write. It takes me forever, but I still enjoy it. Just some of our Twitter stuff. I'm running out of time. How many are getting up in the middle of the night? It's here. So, just keeping up. So I'll finish here. When hiring a planetarium educator or part-time people, I think Dan was talking about interviewing and all that stuff. These are the questions I like to ask. Who was your favorite teacher? Why? Who was your worst teacher? Why? Be like your favorite teacher. Because they're all going to talk passion, enthusiasm, knowledge. They're going to say the same answers. And they're going to say the same ones for the worst teacher. And I don't like to hire people who, whatever, the monotone voice and just generalists. So that's my talk. Any questions? Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I know we have a question on the Zoom chat. Shannon, would you like to share that?
So we have a question from Jim Streitzer. Can we put him through?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right,
You
go
hear
ahead,
me?
Jim. Yes, go ahead.
Bob, you're my favorite teacher.
Coming from you, John, that's very kind.
No, you're fabulous. What an enthusiastic guy. But I think you might think about this Kurzgesagt. And also, don't forget about John McPhee in your list of book of writers, people, especially geology is fabulous. And you also have to send me a PDF of this talk when you get home. It's terrific. Thanks.
Sure, yeah, 10 minutes. I couldn't put all my favorite people up there. It's, anyone else?
Awesome. We're technically out of time, but there's no one following Bob. So you can always harass him afterwards as well. But if you want to head over to a talk, they'll be getting started here in just a minute. So thank you again.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Thank you.